Good evening and thank you for joining us for CBS News Detroit at 7. I'm Shayna Humphreys. We begin with an update on the shooting at Michigan State University. Today, investigators revealed what they found in a note from the shooter, Anthony McCray, and a possible motive. We're also learning more about some past interactions he had had with police. Andres Gutierrez has the latest.
His father didn't believe that he had any friends, let alone 20 of them, that would help him put this out.
Although Anthony McCray wanted people to believe several others were involved in Monday's massacre at Michigan State University, police confirmed the 43-year-old acted alone. Following up on a tip that night, 2 Lansing police officers spotted him walking home.
They exited their vehicle, ordered him to show his hands. However, he produced a weapon and then killed himself.
On him, they found a 2-page handwritten note in which police say he felt slighted at the world, making threats against a church, schools in Ewing, New Jersey, where he lived several years ago, and his former workplace.
Through our investigation, we found that he had had contact with some of those places. He was an employee of the Meyer warehouse at one time. In a couple of other businesses, it appears that he'd had some issues with the employees there, where he was asked to leave.
McCray was carrying dozens of rounds of ammo and 2 handguns, which weren't registered but purchased legally, after the former Ingham County prosecutor agreed to give him a plea deal in 2019 for a weapons charge that knocked it down from a felony to a misdemeanor.
We would all hope that a prosecutor would uphold the law as it's written.
But in a statement, the former prosecutor denied ever having a direct connection to the case, writing in part, the vast majority of cases are resolved by pleas, so that in and of itself is not noteworthy or exceptional. Going on to say, even those barred from legally possessing a firearm can sadly readily obtain one or more illegally. Investigators are now examining his cell phone and journals they collected at McCray's home to learn the why behind this heinous act.
That's the question on all of our minds, and we're working our best to try to determine that as best as possible.
Along with the 2019 weapons charge, Lansing police say in 2005, McCray was questioned in connection to a larceny or a theft case. Joining us now is Al Shenouda, former security advisor with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and a former command officer with Detroit Police. Al, you have spent much of your career studying threats, active shooters, advising on safety and security concerns. When you hear these details, as we're learning more about the investigation, about the MSU shooter, what stands out to you the most?
I think the most interesting in this case, unlike other school shooters where there's usually a direct nexus between the shooter and the school itself, either they're a student, a former student, former staff member, or current staff member. In this case, this person, as best we could tell, has absolutely no ties to the university whatsoever, and he has no ties to the victim. It's a completely, totally random attack until they can determine, further, more concrete motives. But this is the most striking thing. This is probably the only school shooting case where there is no direct linkage.
Yeah, there's usually some sort of connection to the place or the victims?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So this is the only one that I could think of that has no linkage.
Talk about the end goal of the investigation. Of course, you have to investigate a horrific crime like this. There's the closure aspect for the victims' families, for the thousands of people who were impacted by this. But of course, the shooter took his own life. He's not going to face prosecution. Talk about what can come out of these investigations.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, we have, to a certain extent, in the United States and elsewhere, have in law enforcement and, in a variety of career fields that deal with this particular issue of mass shootings. I mean, we have learned through tragedy. So there's definitely lessons learned that can be gleaned. In this particular case, obviously we still have an issue between the background check, the federal background check system, and basically, people that are mentally ill or have, databases the databases are not integrated. So that's one particular issue. Second issue, in this particular case, that makes it difficult for MSU. This person is totally not on the radar. So by not being on the radar, it makes it virtually impossible for law enforcement, especially campus police, to have picked up on him earlier, short of some kind of happenstance, stop or something like that. So this is basically what we call a complete total black horse.
Yeah. So when you have a lone wolf situation like this, he legally purchased the guns. I suppose they were not registered, but did legally purchase them. When you can't really prevent that aspect of this. What else do you think could change? Do you think anything will change on campuses, on MSU's campus specifically from this?
Yes, well, in this particular case, this particular attack is what we call a marauding attack, or what the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI has labeled as marauding attacks. These are particular attacks where the aggressor or the assailant starts at one location and then basically commits acts of violence and then continues to other locations, repeating the same process, whether it's, mass stabbings using edged weapons or even vehicle rammings or firearms. So the problem is with open campuses is how do you secure these open campuses or any other areas of mass gathering that are so massive? So one of the things that we recommend going forward is basically looking at using acoustic detection cameras. So these cameras are pick up on gunshots, automatically focus the cameras, notifying dispatch centers exactly where it is. One of the problems here that it was very difficult to locate this person. It was at night and he was on the move. So by using some of this technology, you can get basically real-time information about, is shooting or shots fired, and vector law enforcement for the initial response right to the shooter. These cameras can also track people. So there's technologies that can be put into place.
Yeah. When you're talking about, high schools and below, and not a wide open campus, a singular building or a workplace, a lot of times entry is restricted. There are, different ways to buzz in through a door. It's restricted access. Is that even possible, or do you think that's where things need to move, even in a large, sprawling, open campus?
So obviously, since we've had school shootings, non-campus related shootings, K through 12s, the preference is to basically operate schools on a lockout basis, and like you said, that people are identified in advance and they get buzzed in and they get buzzed out. That's a very controlled space. You can do that. The campus scenario is this. We also recommend access control, swipe cards and all that for residence dorms and resident areas and stuff like that. But it's very difficult for common areas. So if you notice that these are common areas, student center and the library, those are actually designed as part of the university experience and the university's commitment to community outreach, that they're actually open to the public. So restricting those access could be difficult, but if as a situation, persists, this is a general persistent threat that's not going away. So they're gonna be looking at different, more restrictive models, certainly. So security at this point comes at the expense of both convenience and, public forums.
Yeah, I mean, beyond convenience, do you think it's even feasible when you're in a place with thousands, tens of thousands of people passing through every day? Is it feasible to have everyone kind of swiping in single file? Very
difficult. The only way that would really work is if you take like a plant environment where you got 1,500 people, 2,000 people on a shift, you would have to install turnstiles, because you have to be able to prevent piggyback and all that, and it has to be done. So it would have to be done a card swipe system with turnstiles. That's the only way it would work.
Does that create another potential risk? I mean, I'm thinking fire risk, or when people are trying to quickly exit or run from a building.
That's the other problem is, obviously there has to be a fail-safe mechanism where they're able to exit safely regardless, but yeah, turnstiles do hamper that. Also, anytime that you have, lines forming and people, queuing, if you could imagine like in sports and entertainment, for instance, and people long lines and people standing in a queue, they actually become the soft target right then and there. So it's challenging with how you restrict access.
Yeah. What else do you think can be learned from this investigation? We talked a little bit off camera about educating the public on the red flags for when somebody may be isolated, somebody may have the potential to resort to violence, and intervening.
That's correct. So the U.S. Secret Service just recently released through the National Threat Assessment Center, basically a comprehensive 5-year study of mass shootings in the United States. And there was basically 6 conclusions that we were pretty much expecting. But the reality of the deal is the common denominator in the bulk of these school shootings and other mass shootings is basically some form of mental illness, whether it's diagnosed or not. And I think educating the public, through a community-wide approach of basically what these signs are and is really important. So family members, school staff and school workers, other workers, outside schools, in workplace violence scenarios, that they can pick up on troubled individuals and people that are going through this downward spiral where they become more and more disattached, disillusioned, and frankly becoming more and more dangerous as time goes by. So I think there's definitely signs, and we should really embrace a national and statewide campaigns to educate the public what those warning signs are. Also, the accessibility of firearms is a second piece to that. So if they're displaying these signs and they have access to the firearm, then that's an excellent indicator that this is probably should be a person that requires some more assistance that should be, focused on.
Sure. All right, speaking of campaigns, 3 words we're going to focus on when we return after this break, and that is run, hide, and fight. There is a campaign that goes by those 3 words, and thousands of Michigan State students received that in an alert Monday night. So we're going to talk about that campaign, and you have quite a bit of familiarity with that. We'll be back with Al Shenouda after this.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right. Local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County. It's here, the new CBS News Detroit.
Covering every corner of our community.
With experienced journalists, uncovering the stories that truly matter to you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
And weather experts, always looking ahead to prepare you for what's next. Live, streaming, and on demand, with more hours of local news coming soon.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it, right here on CBS News Detroit.
Weekdays at 5, 6, and 11, and streaming live.
MSU students were forced to run for their lives from Berkey Hall and the MSU Union after the shooter opened fire on Monday night. Now, FBI victim specialists have been helping students slowly ease back into those buildings. Eric Hamoke reports from outside Berkey Hall, where 2 of the 3 victims lost their lives.
Still surrounded by police tape, Berkey Hall sits silent. Now 3 days after the chaos that killed 3 students, 2 of them just inside.
It's basically my backyard, and happening here is just crazy.
Outside, we met Adi Walia. He had classes here last year.
I walk into these front doors and everything would be normal, and now coming back to campus, the first time coming back since that day, it's crazy.
Walia, like thousands of other students here, say they are still trying to process what happened in a place where they once felt safe.
We care about the students, they're part of the community, and we want them to be mentally healthy and get back on their feet.
For the past few days, FBI Michigan has been offering support through victim specialists by helping certain students slowly ease back into the building they couldn't get away from fast enough Monday.
It was very emotional. Again, it was the first time they were stepping foot back in a building where there was an extremely violent incident.
There were people here that day that were really hurt and killed, and just walking into an environment where you know that you could have been here that night.
Walia wasn't inside Berkey Hall the night of the shooting. But he stood in front of it today knowing the lesson on healing he's been forced to endure is just beginning.
I want to get, over this and as best as I can, and making my trips here this is a way of me accepting what has happened and being able to move on. But this is still something scary,
The special agent says most of the items left behind at the Union and Berkey Hall have been picked up. The rest will be turned over to University Police for students to claim when they are ready. Both Berkey Hall and the Union will be closed for the rest of the semester. Reporting on campus, Erica Moke, CBS News, Detroit.
Once again, we are joined by Al Shenouda, former security advisor with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and a former command officer with Detroit Police. We just saw in that story the traumatizing effect of what happened on Monday for the students who were not injured or killed, but who witnessed this and had to see this place they call home turn into a crime scene. One of the things that I find especially traumatizing is everybody got that text that said run, hide, fight on Monday night. And that's when you know this is real. This is not a drill. Many of these students, if not all of them, are familiar with active shooter trainings now. Sure. That is a part of life now when you're a student coming up through school. You're very familiar with those three words and with this campaign. This is something that's national, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah, tell us about run, hide, fight. Where does that come from?
So the Department of Home, every federal agency in 2013 was tasked by the White House and to a lesser extent Congress to develop some kind of methodology, so as part of a public service campaign to train the public at large, but mostly school students, what would happen in an active shooter scenario and how to react, how to respond, how to protect yourself. So focus groups were formed with Homeland Security and the FBI, bringing subject matter experts from all over the world globally in various areas, not just security and anti-terrorism, but from intelligence, behavioral sciences, child development experts. And the idea is, some of the shootings are similar, but they're not all the same. They're all situational. And how do you come up with the common methodology? So the first groups that I was working with were talking about the 3 outs: run out, hide out, or fight it out, which was later basically solidified into run, hide, fight for purposes of similarity. So the campaign was, the methodology for run, hide, fight behind it was, I can't remember exactly, but I believe we had 165 active shooter incidents that we used to form the methodology. So the tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, that came out of that is basically those are your 3 best options, and and they're somewhat the best. They're the best options that you have at the time based on your situation. So that's how it was formed. So it was also Run, Hide, Fight was an adaptation of Stop, Drop, and Roll, the National Fire Service campaign, and that was predicated on Duck and Cover back in the late 50s and 60s, the campaign for school safety. So the President's committee insisted that federal agencies cooperate and develop. So within a 8 months period, we were able to develop that. I was a senior technical advisor on that working group. Yeah. So we had literally dozens. We had hundreds of experts. Yeah. 45 groups.
And you see why that's what everyone landed on. 3 words: run, hide, fight. It's very simple to remember. In a fast-paced, terrifying life or death situation, is it the simplicity of it that you will remember it, yes, even years later after you've learned it?
So there's an element of stickiness. So those other methodologies that were being developed at the time, there were multiple acronyms and more complex acronyms. We had to keep it very, very simple to have that element of stickiness, especially under crisis. Mm-hmm. And we had to drill it over and over again. So Run, Hide, Fight was basically being developed and then became part of the national rollout. The same time that we were developing the S4 campaign, which is the national campaign, if you see something, say something. Mm-hmm. It's called the S4 campaign. So both of them were basically on parallel tracks, and then they basically, premiered in the United States relatively at the same time. So one was for obviously specific activity reporting, and then the other one is basically surviving active shooter and other active assailant events. And then ultimately, I believe don't hold me to this, but I think in 2016, we shared both methodologies with all NATO countries.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And the goal, the hope, of course, is that it would become second nature, that if there is a threat, as soon as you do receive an alert like that, whether
Yes.
a college student or in any other situation,
Yes.
that it would be your instinct. Talk about those 3 steps a little bit. And, you know, for many people, their instinct may be to hide first, but the point is to first run and get away if you can.
If you can. So it's totally situational based on the nature of the threat. The concept that basically gauges whether you're going to run, hide, or fight is a concept known. The technical term is threat proxemics. That's the time, distance, and space relationship between you and the assailant. The general rule is the more distance that you have between you and the assailant, the more time you have, and yes, you can safely flee or exit the area or the facility. The closer we are in proximity, we're going to have to do a couple of things. A, if you're going to hide, that's basically line of sight, avoiding line of sight. That in and of itself could be very effective, especially if that's all you have. What we would prefer that you do is if you hide, is you get behind a locked door. So if you get into an office or something like that, or a classroom and can lock the door, there's only one documented case in the United States in which a person actually took the time to disable a lock by shooting the lockout. So the shooter is basically under extreme time constraints in order to cause a mass casualty incident, usually within 5, no more than 10 minutes before law enforcement responds. So they're under a time clock to basically get the count as high as they can. So one locked door could literally save your life. And then lastly is fight, and that's basically where we're very much in arm's reach or in very, very close proximity, where you have to make a physical play for the weapon or conduct a swarm in which you lay ambush and basically yourself, multiple students, multiple colleagues in a workplace or something like that. They end up basically rushing the assailant and basically attempting to disarm them.
And that should generally be a last resort.
Yeah, you would think it's a last resort, and obviously, you know, we would hate it to come to that, but it's definitely survivable.
Yeah.
If you understand that and have a survival mentality and a concept on how to do it, and by watching the Department of Homeland Security FBI videos, you can definitely develop a plan. Also, your workplace, your child's school, they should all have plans for active shooter, and they should also have, you know, dedicated lockdown shelter-in-place locations where they can, where, you know, people can basically effectively lock down.
Yeah.
American law enforcement, for the most part, are going to respond within 5 minutes to an active shooter incident in a major metro area. So you have to hold out for a short period of time. The shooter also knows that.
Yeah. Well, but we have just a little bit of time left, but I know there's a new school security initiative going on in the Metro Detroit area, but we haven't heard very many details. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of districts that try to figure out what is the combination of having school resource officers, how much it's going to cost, bringing private security in, should they be armed, should they be unarmed? These are all, you know, very, very, you know, profound questions, and developing a school safety and security program. And that program can't just be security oriented, it has to be safety oriented, it also has to be preparedness oriented. So, you know, standard preparedness techniques, planning, training, exercising, emergency management has to be built in it. So this holistic approach to how to provide school safety in whether it's a campus environment or, you know, a K through 12 is right now the focal point. And it's basically a combination of all these things coming together. There's certainly a critical law enforcement shortage, so private security is supplementing, but that private security has to be very, very highly qualified, and of course, there's a cost associated with that.
Right.
And you can't be one-dimensional. You have to prepare for, you got to be able to drill, you have to be able to evacuate, you got to be prepared for a variety of contingencies. So, you know, it's a significant investment, but it's definitely warranted.
All right. Al, thank you so much for your time and expertise today.
Thank you, Shenna. Very nice meeting you, and congratulations on the new studio.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.